that becomes the rose. I mean, it's that whole thing that the Tao teaches us, isn't it? That out of the invisibleness, out of the no-thingness, out of the space that has no name, it's the space that's doing nothing, but leaving nothing undone. The Tao does nothing and leaves nothing undone. And you are from the Tao. I'd like to just, for a few moments, speak about one more thought. I'd like to see you work at changing. To change the thought from notice me, to what Lao Tzu calls living in obscurity, becoming more obscure. We live in a celebrity-obsessed world, don't we? Look at me. Notice me. The Tao teaches something completely the opposite. Listen to the 66th verse of the Tao. Water again. The sea stays low. And because the sea stays low, all of the rivers and all of the streams empty into it. Because it stays humble. Because it stays in that place of just allowing everything to come to you. He was trying to teach us the important lesson of letting what we know is coming come to us. I practice this so much more now in my life than I did at one time. I can remember years ago, I had written a book called Your Erroneous Zones back in the 70s, and it stayed on the New York Times bestseller list for something like 27 months. And many weeks it would be number 1, and then it would go down to number 3, and then it would go to number 2, and down to 7, and all of that. And I was doing the Tonight Show in those days, and on a regular basis, and so many of the other shows, the Merv Griffin and Phil Donahue and Dinah Shore. I became like a regular on the Dinah Shore. I was like, hobnobbing with Burt Lancaster folks, and what you do is you call and find out where you appear on the bestseller list for the following week on Wednesday. So you call up on Wednesday, not for the Sunday coming up, but for the following week. And I called home, and my ego was pretty strong, and I was very much into a lot of notice me. I really believe that true nobility is not about being better than anyone else now. It's about being better than you used to be. And I think I'm better than I used to be. And I know that I'm better than I used to be in every quality or every characteristic that I hold to be valuable. But in those days I was into notice me. And I called home, and I had trained my wife to call the New York Times. She had this special number that she could call, and with a certain code, and she could find out where I was going to appear on the bestseller list the following week. So I called her up and I said, where am I on the bestseller list next week? I was out in California doing something, and she said, you're not on the bestseller list. I said, what are you talking about? I was number 1 on the bestseller list last week. I said, even my voice changed when I said, what do you mean I'm not on the bestseller list? She said, you're not on the bestseller list. I'm sorry. She said, your book is on the bestseller list. Big distinction there, isn't it? Between believing that this is me and recognizing that you can let go a little bit of that. Listen to verse 66 of the Tao. Why is the sea king of 100 streams? Because it lies below them. Humility gives it its power. That's a very important principle to understand. And I live on the ocean, right next to it. It's my front yard. And always I watch it to learn something from this thing called the ocean, which is the most powerful source of life that we have on the planet. Without it, there's no life on this planet. And because it stays low, so what does this have to say to us? Do you have the capacity to get past that ego need to always be saying, notice me, look how important I am. I mean, there's been a proliferation of this lately with this celebrity silly stuff, isn't it? I mean, CNN is doing, full hour shows on silly little things about what happened to this particular celebrity or what happened to that celebrity, and the celebrity's never even done anything. And there's all of this talk about it, and all of the new magazines. I mean, and you go through an airport and you look on the newsstand and all the same photos, just with different magazines. I don't even know what the names of all of them are, but there's like this huge market now that we have for people to get into a state of notice me, notice me, notice me. And how much do we train our young people, particularly in our schools and so on, that the one who is the star is the one who gets the most attention. The one who is the most important and the most valuable is the one that has the most people liking them, and so on. This constant obsession with needing to be noticed, when in fact, what I have found for myself is the happiest moments of my life are when I can do it low and slow and not have anybody out there even know what I'm doing. To be able to, Louise never would have advertised the fact of some of the things I talk about with her generosity. She does it anonymously. It's almost always done in those ways. No, look at me, look and notice me, how important I am, and so on. So much to learn from that kind of wisdom, from that kind of inner connection to the Tao, the ability and the willingness to do it anonymously. To say that you can just get done almost anything that you want to get done if you don't become obsessed with taking credit for it. Remember the movie The Magnificent Obsession? Yeah. The movie made back, I think, in the 50s. And it was really about what was the magnificent obsession. It was the ability to be able to give anonymously. What is Alcoholics Anonymous? It is everybody stays anonymous. Nobody has a title. There's not even anybody in charge. There's no leaders of this. There's no president. There's no vice president. There's no organization. It's just, here's a group of people who just want to help other people whose lives are out of control. So here's a meeting place. And you come and one day somebody will chair it, and then somebody else another day will chair it. And one of the things I've found when I attend one of these meetings is that I feel, you'll see so many people who are downtrodden, who feel as if their life has passed them by, who look like they don't have any teeth, they haven't shaved, they're dirty, they're God in disguise. Mother Teresa was asked the question about what she does when she was in Calcutta, and she said, every day, I see Jesus Christ in all of his distressing disguises. All of his distressing disguises. That you can see this source, you can see the Tao, you can see it when, particularly in those who are the most obscure, the most isolated from everyone else. And whenever I go to one of those meetings and I hear people get up and they tell their stories, I feel there's so much presence of the source, of God, of spirit, of Lao Tzu, of Tao, whatever you want to call it, in one of those meetings than I've ever felt in any church. I've never felt the presence of it more. And I encourage you, any of you watching this right now, go to one of those meetings. You don't have to be an alcoholic. You don't have to. I'm not an alcoholic. I don't call myself an alcoholic. I was never out of control. I drank, but I wasn't out of control. And but I still go to those meetings. I have people in my own family that have struggled with addiction, and I go with them, and I sit there and I listen to those stories, and I get shivers down my back when I think about how beautiful it is to be in the presence of people. All they want to do is help each other. There's a movie called My Name is Bill W. James Woods played it, and James Garner is in it. And his life just got totally out of control with addictions, totally out of control. And then he went to he went to one of these meetings, and he began to realize, and he said, we can actually take these people, and all we have to do is love them. All we have to do is, and he's so excited about the concept of being able to go out there and offer it. And I keep referring to Louise because she's such a hero to me. There was a time back in the 80s when our president wasn't even able to say the word AIDS, was he? I mean, he could come on. And here was this lady who, before this thing became the worldwide phenomenon that it is, was having meetings in her own house and bringing these people, these downtrodden people who had been labeled outcasts in society, and offering them a place to learn how to love each other and to care for each other. This was long before there was any celebrity status associated with trying to end this horrible crisis that our country has and our world has had. There was James Wood, so excited about the idea of we can create a place where we're anonymous. Nobody has to know anything about us. We don't have to say our names. We don't have to say anything. We just have to come there and we can help each other. And before that happened, everybody who got out of control with addictions, particularly with alcohol, would die. There was no cure. There was no cure. And where did they find their cure? They found it in being anonymous. They found it in being obscure. They found it in having no organization. They found it in having no elected representative. They found it in having no rules. There are no rules. You just come and we care. If you've been 1 day or 1 hour sober, or even if you're drunk, you come. We care about you. And you are not that alcohol. Who you are is this divine soul. In the 36th verse of the Tao Te Ching, it says, "The gentle outlast the strong. The obscure outlast the obvious." Try to become a little more obscure, a little less interfering, a little less notice me, a little less, one of the specific kinds of things that you can do is just as you're about, when somebody else is talking, just as you're about to interject what you've been thinking about for the whole time, waiting for them to stop talking, just stop, to bite your tongue and say, "Tell me more." Or, "That's very interesting. I have never heard that point of view before." Even if they totally, completely disagree with everything that you stand for, to be willing to listen, to be able to stop. Practice it. I practiced it when I did these verses of the Tao. I practiced it every single day while I was working on that. Just staying obscure. And for me, that's not always so easy because of just being recognized wherever I go. And if I saw someone who was about to recognize me, I would just put my head down. I would just walk a little bit past them like something. Right now, I just want to be anonymous. Right now, I want to be obscure. The Tao says, storms always end. Verse 23, fierce winds don't blow all morning. A downpour of rain doesn't last all day. Who does this? Heaven and earth. You're already connected to everything you want or need. It will come to you at the exact perfect time, as the rivers and the streams come to the ocean at the perfect time and place. You gotta trust. You gotta know it's going to come to you. You don't have to chase after it. You can become a little less obsessed with your ego and your self-importance and who you are and what you've done, and you can get so much more done. And you know what? It's the most peaceful and sweet, delicious way. It's like the song that Cecilia was singing about the rose. Thank you so much, and God bless you. There is a world beyond the world of the changing. Beyond the world of the changing. So that the world of the changing, when Lao Tzu, the great ancient founder of the Tao, back in the 5th century BC, the founder of Taoism, a beautiful sort of philosophy which is all summarized in about 83 pages. It's great. You can read it in an afternoon. And Lao Tzu was asked the question, what is real, Master? What is real? And his response was, that is real, which never changes. So almost as if you have to look at your own life and your own self, and you have to ask the question, what part of me meets that criteria? What part of me says, I am eternal? I have always been. What part of you has never changed? I don't know about you, but it's not my body. I promise you that. My body has undergone dramatic changes, but there's inside of this body, there is a witness. And this witness is noticing and observing and has never aged or never changed. Lao Tzu said the second thing that historically everyone has believed in is that we are connected to that world that is never changing. That it is a part of us. We live with it. It's within us. Everything that we see in the physical world is changing. I was giving a talk not too long ago in Baltimore, and I was sitting just jotting down a few things that I wanted to talk about that evening, and there was a mirrored wall right next to me. The whole wall was mirrored. And I was feeling really great. I had just run about 10 miles, and I was just feeling really up and terrific, and I had a nice big audience coming that night, and everything was just really great. And I looked up over at the wall, and then I looked down again, and then I looked again real fast. Have you ever done that, where you look in the mirror and you say, who is that in there? And I looked down and I looked in again. And then I stopped and I put my pen down and I started staring at this face that was looking back at me. And I said, there's an old man in there renting my face. That's not me. You see, the part of me that is in here, that has been watching this, that has been observing this, that has been noticing this, has never aged and never does. It never can. I remember one time I was out running when we were on the road, and my wife was with me, and I had been running for a couple of hours and early in the morning, and it was a real beautiful, crisp morning, and she waved at me and she said, come on, we're going to have breakfast or something. And I stopped running and I ran across this field, and there was a fence. The fence was about this high. And I ran up to the fence and I hurled over the fence. I just jumped over the fence. And she looked at me, she said, you can't do that. I said, do what? She said, you're 56 years old. You don't jump over fences when you're 56 years old. You could kill yourself. I said, I forgot. And the part of me that's in here, that's noticing, that's watching, and the part of you that's in you, watching, things are falling. You've noticed that, right? Things are wrinkling. Things are turning gray. There's a process of shifting and changing. But there's a world beyond that. And all of these great teachers speak to that world, the world that is beyond the world of the changing. And it's almost as if we have to begin to know that world. There's a famous poem by Emily Dickinson, who's one of the people I wrote about in Wisdom of the Ages. Emily Dickinson, who 19th century poet, lived up in Massachusetts. Brilliant lady, wrote thousands of poems. A lot of them were about higher awareness and higher consciousness. In a very simple language, she said, imagine holding up a handful of dust or dirt. She said, this quiet dust was gentlemen and ladies and lads and girls, was laughter and ability and sighing and frocks and curls. This passive place, a summer's nimble mansion where bloom and bees fulfilled their oriental circuit, then ceased like these. This quiet dust was gentlemen and ladies and lads and girls, was laughter and ability and sighing and frocks and curls. It's all quiet dust, all of it. And it's all in a state of change. And who we are is not that dust. And that's what the poets and the philosophers and the great teachers have come to tell us about and risk their lives to tell us, that there's something more to it. You all, when you go to the physician and you get a blood test, and they'll come back and they'll tell you about your iron count. There's a finite supply of iron on the planet. There's just so much iron. Some of it's flowing through your veins. The question, the eternal question, is where was that iron that's flowing through your vein before you showed up here? And where will it be when you leave? Because who you are is not that which is that material, but who you are
is that quiet observer in there. And this is called, for want of a better term, it's called the world of the soul.
Choosing to experience peace by focusing on what you are for. You can experience peace by balancing all that transpires around you with God consciousness. There's nothing that requires you to react to evil doing with a non-spiritual mental response. You have a choice to put your mental energy into what you desire, and in so doing, create a new world. Let me tell you how I choose to respond to the bombardment of messages that focus on what's wrong in the world. First, I remind myself that for every act of evil, there are a million acts of kindness. I choose to believe that people are essentially good, and that by staying in this belief system, I help bring more of this consciousness to fruition. When enough of us take on this notion, we'll learn to live collectively in this peaceful awareness. Secondly, I know for certain that no amount of hatred in my heart will ever bring about peace. Hatred will only contribute more to the presence of those human-made destructive energies. So I choose to place my attention on what I am for, and on my feeling good. I support peace, not war. As Albert Einstein once remarked, I am not only a pacifist, but a militant pacifist. Nothing will end war unless the people themselves refuse to go to war. Unquote. I, as a recipient of the Einstein Award from the Albert Einstein College of Medicine of Yeshiva University, would humbly add, and unless people refuse to ever think warlike thoughts. In Long Walk to Freedom, Nelson Mandela wrote, "To make peace with an enemy, one must work with that enemy, and that enemy becomes one's partner." I know that we are all partners with each other. This is how I think. And when I see footage of a world that's in disarray, because many have forgotten this, I still choose to know that we'll ultimately learn to live this way collectively. But it begins with each of us refusing to be instruments of non-peace in all of our thoughts and consequently all of our behaviors. Adolf Hitler's designated successor, Hermann Göring, is quoted in Nuremberg Diary as saying, "Why, of course the people don't want war. But after all, it's the leaders of the country who determine the policy, and it's always a simple matter to drag the people along, whether it's a democracy or a fascist dictatorship or a parliament or a communist dictatorship. Voice or no voice, the people can always be brought to the bidding of the leaders. That is easy. All you have to do is tell them that they're being attacked and denounce the pacifists for lack of patriotism and exposing the country to danger. It works the same way in any country." That was Hermann Göring. I choose not to be one of those people who are dragged along. I refuse to be brought to the bidding of any leader who attempts to convince me that my beliefs in peace make me unpatriotic. When an unidentified Pentagon official was asked why the U.S. military censored graphic footage from the Gulf War, he responded, "If we let people see that kind of thing, there would never again be any war." Well, that's my goal. To live in a world where warlike thoughts are impossible because we're placing all of our mental energy on what we are for rather than on what we hate. Former President Dwight Eisenhower, who was also a commander of the Allies in World War II, once remarked, "Every gun that is made, every warship launched, every rocket fired signifies, in the final sense, a theft from those who hunger and are not fed, those who are cold and are not clothed. This world in arms is not spending money alone. It is spending the sweat of its laborers, the genius of its scientists, the hopes of its children. This is not a way of life at all in any true sense." This is a call to get ourselves and our world in balance. Peace demands heroic thinking and a purity of conscience. Third, when I see and hear evil, I remind myself, I didn't sign up to come here to be a part of hatred. While others obviously have, I'll remember to stay with the inner sense of peace that calls to me, and I'll surround those who behave in evil ways with the same light energy. I simply refuse to go to war in my thoughts. I choose to be a beacon of light for the places of darkness that are bereft of this kind of illuminating energy. Finally, as the dispatches of violence continue to come my way, I remind myself over and over again that we have a choice in how we respond to all of this. I know that by feeling hateful in response to hate, I only contribute to the presence of hatred in the world. As an ancient Chinese proverb tells us, quote, "If you decide to pursue revenge, you'd better dig 2 graves, unquote. I know that I have a choice to see what's good about the world rather than what has gone wrong. When those communiques of violence and hatred come streaming toward me, I push the mute button or even the off button, and I recall what the Dalai Lama once said. Quote, "Compassion and love are not mere luxuries. As the source of both inner and outer peace, they are fundamental to the continued survival of our species." unquote. Those are extremely valuable words describing our need to be in balance. I stay balanced on this dimension of being in a peaceful world by saying them over and over and over again. I now know for certain that I'm obliged to stay in a consciousness of compassion and love, not only to maintain my own balance, but to help ensure the continued survival of our species. There can be no greater calling.
It's all of it is there to teach us something grand and something delightful, and that helps us move to higher and more spiritual places. So the way that you eliminate adversity is literally to be thankful for it and to say thank you for everything that is showing up in my life. It is going to teach me something profound. And some of the most difficult and very troublesome kinds of things that have occurred to me in my life, what I thought were at the time, have taught me how to be a better writer, a better speaker, a kinder person, a better human being. Because true nobility, it's not about being better than other people. It's about being better than you used to be. And the way that you get better at being than you used to be is by having these challenges show up and then transcending them and overcoming them. I don't look back on my days of drinking, which stopped 17 years ago, as anything other than great and wonderful events that helped me. All of that drinking and all of the behavior and the drugs that I did and all of those kinds of things have helped me to become a stronger, more purified, more decent, better human being, better husband, better father, better speaker, better man as a person. Anyway, let me try to get through the rest of these. We just have a few moments left.
Okay.
Were you going to say something, Diane?
Well, I was going to say, do you think people get caught up in the why me kind of mentality?
Yeah, I think they do, instead of saying, why not me? So thank you. Thank you for all of it, every single bit of it. I mean, there's a slogan here on Maui that says, no rain, no rainbows. So I always remind people of that whenever there's a rainy day and the tourists are all here and they're all upset about the rain. I say, but you see all those rainbows that you just love every day? They have rainbows over here on the island. You can't have them without the rain. And I think it's a good symbol for our lives. One of the things that Gandhi said that's really, I think, very important is that there's more to life than making things go faster and making it always increase our speed. That the idea that we have to get there fast, we have to be ahead of the other person, slowing ourselves down. In the 26th verse of the Tao that I was writing about this morning, it talks about the stillness, about being able to, that stillness is the mother of unrest. In other words, the master of unrest. In other words, in order to be able to get to a place where you are no longer filled with unrest, you have to go to this place of stillness, this place of quiet, this place of peace that is within each and every one of us. And that means not telling yourself that you have to be there ahead of the other guy, not rushing through the traffic lights, but meditating your way through when a yellow light comes, instead of rushing through it, that's just a habit. Instead of that, just slowing down, putting your foot on the brake and saying, thank you for 1 minute to just sit here and be at peace and be kind and be in a sense of harmony with my source, which is always at peace. Also, I said, do everything that you can to eliminate debt in your life, because all of the debt that you have, the credit card debt, the money that you owe the banks, the mortgages, all of those kinds of things are a way of giving up control of your life and putting it into the hands of someone who will be controlling the purse strings of your life. And also to let go of your idea about everything is evaluated on the basis of how much it costs or how much it's worth. Try to take the dollar value off of things and just enjoy everything in your life for what it is.
I'm going through something right now, and I'm kind of wanting to know why all this is happening to me in my life. At 15, my dad died unexpectedly of, an aortic aneurysm, and then I dealt with that somewhat decent. I don't want to say great, but I was only 15. And then I got married, and my husband and I struggled for 4.5 years to get pregnant, with one miscarriage along the way. And we got pregnant in November last year. We found out December 8th. And then on April 4th, we found out that the baby was really sick. Mm-hmm. And I ended up delivering a stillborn on April 19th. Mm-hmm. And I'm just not quite sure why all this is happening and how to get through it.
Yeah, I can hear your pain. First of all, as you move along this path that I'm writing about, especially on inspiration, you find out that all of the greatest teachers who've ever walked among us, including Jesus, all It is the inevitability of all things, that everything that composes decomposes. And the question isn't whether it's going to decompose. The question that we have as human beings is, how long is it going to take? How much time do we get? When you say the words, my father died unexpectedly, my immediate response to that is unexpected to you.
Yeah.
But not to God, and not, and that the moment that your father was conceived and the moment that he showed up on this planet, his birth was here, independent of his opinion about it, and so was his death. And the same is true of the miscarriages that you've had and the stillbirths that you've had, that there's a perfection in all of this, and that these souls who showed up very, very temporarily, and then for whatever reason that none of us will ever be privy to, weren't ready to show up into this world. What you are doing with it is you're taking it personally. You're saying to yourself that, why me, and how could something so terrible as this happen, and how much of this kind of thing do I have to put up with before I'll have peace in my life? And I'm saying to you, have peace in your life now, and even be in a state of gratitude for just the fact that you've been able to participate in the dance of life. You've already created life twice, and because it didn't last as long as you thought it should last, that's just our ego at work.